You've decided you're ready to become a parent, and suddenly you're overwhelmed with people who feel they have the right to inform you on the correct way to conceive, give birth, what fears you should have, and the proper way to parent. How do you filter through the opinions? How do you know what's trustworthy information and what's a myth or just plain outdated? Welcome to the Birth Ease podcast. Join your host Michelle Smith and her guests as they cut through the noise and fear by sharing valuable tips, tools, and proven methods that help you connect with your own inner wisdom as you navigate the sacred journey that is pregnancy, birth, and parenthood in a more relaxed and confident manner. This podcast does not constitute, nor is it intended, as medical advice.
Hello, Birth Ease families. Welcome to this heartfelt space. I'm your host, Michelle Smith. During these uncertain times of the COVID-19 pandemic, many families are under unforeseen stress. As we all know, families may be facing such challenges as financial hardships due to the inability to work, children are unable to attend school, and the pressures on parents to be the teacher or supervise online distance learning now is really quite overwhelming for so many. And some families are having to navigate this while both parents are still working, or the parents are single parents. The stress of being at home 24/7, fear of contracting the coronavirus, and perhaps the fear of having a child become ill with it, or having a child that does become ill, or another loved one. There are so many layers and nuances to this. And again, so much uncertainty. Some of us are just hanging by a thread, and some of us are finding a bit of a reprieve in this time of social distancing and quarantine measures. For some families, they are enjoying this time together, and for others, tensions are running very, very high. Children are having to navigate a new normal, not being able to see their friends or their family. So many of us are missing our families and friends. It's just a really difficult time, as you all know. That is why I feel so blessed to have Tanya Alvarado here with me. She will be providing some helpful coping tools for families during COVID-19. Tanya is a licensed mental health counselor and owner of a New Path Counseling in East Orlando, Florida, where she works with tweens, teens, and adults in private practice. Areas of specialty include mood disturbances such as anxiety and depression, trauma, and working with Tourette tic disorders. She is CBT, Comprehensive Behavioral Intervention for Tics certified, and an EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing certified therapist. EMDR is a therapy that enables people to heal from the symptoms and emotional distress that are the results of disturbing life experiences. She is also a qualified supervisor for mental health interns. She has a passion for supporting the individuals and families to make positive changes towards health, healing, and creating a new path of life for future generations. Welcome, Tanya, to the Birth Ease podcast. I am so grateful and excited to have you here with us today.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm really excited to be on and honored to speak with you and hopefully give some tips and tools that will be helpful to all of us during this season.
Yes, I just want to jump right in. And what are some of the coping skills that families can utilize during this time? Because we are in such an uncertain and in many ways unprecedented time in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michelle, I think the first thing is to normalize the feelings. I think that that's a tool that is super helpful right now. It's just normalizing that we are all in this collectively and that we are not alone. That feeling grief and panic, anxiety and powerlessness hopelessness and isolation, that those are all normal things that we are all sifting through. So I just want to acknowledge those feelings first and leave space for them, that these feelings are meant to be worked through and not to be an end all be all. It's a process and that we're all in it together. As far as tools for managing those feelings, I think right now, Michelle, it's just being aware. I think the most important thing is pulling back and creating space for awareness of where we're at in our process through coping with this pandemic. The awareness is going to be key to helping us to identify other tools and resources that we need to use.
Yes, you put that so beautifully. Thank you. There are all of these emotions that maybe even we haven't had to deal with in our life before. And I don't think a lot of families even have maybe considered the fact that they're grieving. They're grieving their life as they once knew it and dealing with the uncertainty of not knowing how their life is going to be once this is over. It's a grief process and the isolation and all of these very powerful emotions on their own that are all coalesced together right now.
I definitely agree. And I think that's the key, is acknowledging that grief comes in different forms and fashions. And right now, I do believe, like you said, collectively, we are grieving an emotional loss, for some of us, physical loss or loss of normalcy. And I think when we're able to name it, then we're better able to tame it with some resources and tools.
Yes. Yeah. So, what are some of those tools that maybe families can work with? I think communication, building our communication skills right now is imperative because tensions are just running high. Having children at home 24/7, if you're not used to that, or being at home 24/7 with your partner and financial stress, and maybe you've had a new baby, it's like a pressure cooker almost.
Absolutely. And it's definitely exposing what is inside. So I think it's vital, like you said, to have those communication tools to help us to navigate this as best we can. One of the very most basic tools that I give all of my clients, whether they be a little kid or an adult, is using I statements. And I statements sound something like, I feel sad when I'm not heard. I need better communication. I need to feel heard and supported. So to put it very bluntly, it's a kind of a fill in the blank. And in the beginning, it may feel a little uncomfortable using this way of communicating, but over time, it begins to be more innate and natural. And I can definitely give that to you in a document, Michelle, just so we have it for the audience. But it's an I feel statement, and it's I feel blank when blank, and I need blank. And we want to be very, very careful about how we use this.
Yes.
In these statements, we want to make sure that we're not saying you.
Yes, yes, I was thinking that. Yeah.
The reason being, because a you statement can become a blame statement and put the other person on defense. So we want to make sure that we're bringing it back to self and how we're feeling and the situation, not necessarily the person's actions, but the situation and the context of what we're feeling, and then addressing that unmet need in that last I need, and being very specific. Some people need specifics. They cannot read in between the lines, especially with all of the different roles and responsibilities and stressors we have. We need to be direct in the season with what we need, whether it be I need an hour of quiet time or I need help making dinner. We need to be very direct and to the point with what we need in the season, and helping our partner or our family members to understand that it's not personal, that the situation that we're in is a pressure cooker, like you said, and that we need some support getting through it.
Right. And can you give another example of what that might sound like?
Oh, absolutely. With the I feel statements, it may be something like, I feel insignificant when I'm not heard. I need better communication. I need eye to eye contact when we're speaking and you repeating back to me what you heard me say. I think right now in this pandemic, it's very important that we are using I feel statements and addressing the specifics of what is not being met, So if insignificance is coming up and your partner's walking away while you're talking to them, you're trying to stress something that's very important. Maybe it goes back to, I feel insignificant when we're not working together eye to eye, or I need to sit down when talking about something serious, just to help your partner understand that there's insignificance that's coming up, that's being triggered. And a way that can be mitigated and worked through is, when we're talking about serious things, let's sit down at our dining room table and talk eye to eye and heart to heart in order to make sure we're feeling heard.
Right. And so as you're speaking, what's coming to me as part of this is stopping, finding just a moment to stop and listen to what's going on within our own body, within our own thoughts of, oh, what am I feeling in this? I feel triggered. And a lot of people may not even be aware of their triggers or the term triggers, but just pausing to pay attention. I feel like yelling at my kids. I feel like I'm going to cry. I feel so frustrated, overwhelmed, and pausing to take a moment and sense what's underneath it,
Absolutely.
which is what you're saying. Yeah, I feel insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I can't cope. I feel like this is just too much for me right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that that is key, Michelle, is being able to identify that. And I think one of the biggest challenges right now is that we are wearing many different hats, roles, and responsibilities that are new or overwhelming. And sometimes we don't have the space to process our own feelings, let alone share them with our partner and ask for what we need. And I would encourage couples to go ahead and create a phrase. So there's almost like a timeout, acknowledging that something's manifesting, but that we need more time.
Mm,
So whether it be, I'm going to get back to you on that. I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now, and I need some space to figure out what my needs are. I'll be back to you in 20 minutes, a half an hour. And I think the key to that is retreating and finding some solitude and space to navigate your own feelings before bringing it to the other person. And then also giving the receiving partner in anticipation of when you're going to return and address that issue, so that they're not hanging and there's this open-ended chasm where we're not able to work through. So I think it's really important in that to retreat, find some solitude, self-reflect, and then also to give your partner a time frame of when you'll return and address it. And hopefully by then you'll have more self-reflection and more awareness as to what you're feeling, what's being triggered, and what your specific need is. Because sometimes that can be overwhelming for maybe the receiving partner who really wants to help, but maybe we're struggling with identifying how we're feeling and what we're needing. So just encourage carving out some time and space of just self-reflection, whatever that may look like, whether it's going for a walk or sitting in your hammock on your back porch or taking a shower and self-reflecting. I know these days we have to be creative with the methods in which we are finding space for solitude and reflection in the midst of parenting and working and being a spouse or a partner. So I think it's vital to find those pockets of time to self-reflect, to have better communication and better resolution.
yes, I love all of that you said. And as you were speaking, giving your partner an approximate time that you can return back to them and talk about it, because that unknown of, are we going to talk about it? When are we going to talk about it? What are they going to say? It can create anxiety with the other partner, right? With your partner. It can just make you so anxious. Oh my gosh, what are they going to say? I don't know how to deal with this. So having that specific, let's readdress this tomorrow. Let's readdress this in a few hours, I think is so honoring and vital. I really do. And as you're talking, the other thing that came to me is remembering to stop and just take some deep breaths. Take a deep breath in and breathe in and exhale out, and take some breaths to help get us out of that fight or flight, because a lot of times that's what's happening and people forget to breathe, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it creates part of that cascade.
Absolutely. There's been research that has been done, and I don't have the exact article off the top of my head, but statistically speaking, it takes probably about 20 minutes for the brain to de-escalate once it's been triggered. So that's something that I teach my clients, is that it's going to take you about 20 minutes to shift from your emotion mind to your wise, grounded mind.
I love that.
So being mindful about that we are all in that situation. We all have three parts of our mind. We have our wise mind that's grounded, that's rational, that has access to information and knowledge, but also is informed about our emotions. But when we get triggered, we do shift to our emotion mind, where it's sometimes irrational and overwhelming and flooded with emotions. And those are good places to acknowledge, places to grow and gather information as far as how we're feeling. But we don't want to stay there. So we want to take about 20 minutes to help us to shift to our grounded, wise mind that just is better able to work through this as a problem solver and not as a reactor. We want to kind of train ourselves in a season to observe and to also shift toward being a problem solver, that we want to be an active participant in this process, that we are not victims of our situation. We're trying to be empowered, that there are things within our control, whether it be exercising our voice and asking for what we need or asserting our boundaries, that in the midst of uncertainty and chaos, that we can find these places where we can control certain things. And I think part of it is navigating our feelings and our triggers when they come up.
Yes, and beginning to learn tools to do that. And sometimes those triggers just need space to be acknowledged and heard. I'm feeling this. What is my body wanting to tell me? And step back, just like you were saying, because the triggers are often bringing up that place to be acknowledged and healed. Yes?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think I see triggers as opportunities instead of roadblocks. And I think if we can even shift the way that we're looking at our triggers, it may help us to become better connected to them and see them almost as support, a friend, that these triggers and these feelings are coming up to aid us and support us in our growth.
I love that. I love that. And did you say there are 3 parts of our mind?
Yes. I missed the last one. So thanks for bringing it back around. So some of these tools, they come from DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. But what I love about it is that it teaches us about this being, it's not an or, a black or a white, but it's an and situation, that we can be in a very chaotic situation with this pandemic and we can be grounded.
Yes.
So those seem very unusual and odd and bizarre that those two things can coexist. But I think if we can teach that, then we can feel empowered in the midst of panic and this pandemic. Part of DBT, what we teach our clients is about the 3 different parts of the mind, which there's the grounded, wise mind, and then there's also the reasonable mind, which is full of logic and information, very much like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, just very much to the point. It's a problem solver. And then there's the emotion mind. So those are the 3 parts of the mind. It's a wise mind, reasonable mind, and emotion mind. Those are the 3 parts of the brain. And what's really helpful is acknowledging those 3 different parts so that you can know which state you're in and you can be better able to name it, to tame it. And I normalize that with my clients in letting them know I have those same 3 parts of my mind and I can go to all 3 places, but it's my job and it's also my responsibility and my honor and duty to acknowledge where I'm at and be responsible for navigating that. So if I'm acknowledging that I'm feeling triggered by panic and acknowledging that, my emotion mind is really overwhelmed right now, it's my responsibility and duty to help my brain to shift once I acknowledge I'm getting a little bit stuck doing something that's going to ground me, whether it be I'm going to do a Color Me Calm book, or I'm going to practice gratitude, or I'm going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to go for a run. These things that will help our brain to shift from that emotion mind to that grounded, wise mind, this place of strength and groundedness and connectedness.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you. And as you're talking, it made me think about those times where you can get stressed with your children. And I found sometimes if we can just kind of have that grace and that moment to step back and almost laugh at the situation, wow, we're all feeling really a little snippy at each other. And when my kids and I can kind of step back and kind of laugh about it, it helps break it up and take the seriousness away from it. It can be a good tool if we're like on the edge of getting into that deep emotional mind.
Absolutely. And that's a great tool for this season is using humor and laughter as a shield for our emotional mental state, is being able to laugh and be playful and tickle our kids or laugh with our partners. I think that's a great protective factor that will help us to practice good mental health and to protect us with future challenges that may come our way.
Yes. And one thing I've tried to model with my children these 34 years now, ongoing parenting. So I'm still not done because my little one is 12. It's been consecutive. It's just to pause. And if I realize that I have been in my emotional mind or triggered when I am more calm,
Yes.
to step back and say and model that behavior. I was feeling really overwhelmed. When I'm on the phone with a client,
Mm-hmm.
I need to be able to talk to them uninterrupted without someone asking me lots of questions. I need to focus on them. Or I'm just trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but to apologize and show this is what happened. And I was feeling this way. And I did this to help myself to get centered. And now I'm going to apologize if appropriate and then make restitution if appropriate as well.
Absolutely. And I think, Michelle, that is such a beautiful thing that you're modeling for your kids. And that's a great tool that we can use in the season too, is I call them forgiveness exercises, that when we
Mm.
goof up, which we will, we are people who are broken and we make mistakes. We're not perfect. We're probably never going to be perfect, but we can practice.
We're human.
Absolutely. We can practice being human and showing forgiveness and receiving forgiveness and extending that to others. And I think in this season, this is a great opportunity to practice that, whether it be like you were sharing that example. I'm sorry that, mommy was a little short with you when she was on the phone. I needed blank and I responded blank. And that probably made you feel hurt, probably made you feel small and insignificant. And I'm sorry, mommy didn't mean to do that. Can you please forgive me? And there's something about that connectedness in that moment of asking for forgiveness and giving forgiveness and grace that is just very intimate. And I think it creates safety in a very uncertain time that we see our children, we hear our children, and I think that gives them permission to feel and deal as well. So, what a beautiful thing. What a beautiful gift that you're able to give your children in this season and moving forward, that they are heard and that they are seen. It gives them an opportunity to hear and see their own feelings and to deal with them in healthy ways.
Exactly. And as you're talking, to learn to forgive ourselves as well. Sometimes we're good at extending forgiveness to others, but not so for ourselves. And I think that's a skill that we can cultivate as well.
Absolutely. I think that's a great thing to bring out, is that we can do that externally, but internally, that's very important too, because we can start to create shame and guilt within ourselves that will affect our relationships with our kids and with our partner. So, very important to extend forgiveness to ourselves.
Yes. And can you touch a little bit on forgiveness? Because sometimes forgiveness gets, what's the word I want? Like sometimes people, especially if there's been trauma, well, I can never forgive them. They hurt me. But forgiveness is really more for ourselves, not for the other person as well. Can you touch a little bit on that? Am I making sense?
Yes, absolutely. Forgiveness is so important, I think, in all aspects of our life. But I think forgiveness is a gift that we give ourselves. It's not letting the offender off the hook. It's not saying it's okay what has been done, the offense, but it's saying that I'm choosing to let go of this. I'm choosing to free myself from this situation and extend forgiveness And forgiveness can be something that's done without the other person, the offender, around, because it's really a gift for yourself. I choose to forgive this person for this thing, and I'm choosing to let myself free, because really what it does is it creates anger and frustration and maybe even some hate and animosity, and that holds us captive. The offender and the offense is long forgotten. It's in the past. Although it may feel very much true in the moment and it's valid, the feelings from that is what's holding us captive in this emotional prison. And forgiveness is for you so that you can be set free from those emotions that resulted from that offense. But forgiveness is never agreeing with what happened and not saying it's okay or allowing it to happen again in the future. It's to inform us maybe of changes that we can make and boundaries we can place down. But forgiveness is for us to be set free.
Thank you. You said that so beautifully. So, can you talk about boundaries? Because, especially if we've grown up in a more violent or abusive home as a child, we often don't understand even what boundaries are and how to set them or enforce them.
Absolutely. Well, boundaries are so vital in this season in helping us to navigate this. But you're right, Michelle, if we had maybe poor examples of that in our childhood, we're having to learn and re-navigate the season with healthy boundaries, or healthier, taking steps toward that. So boundaries really they're just limits. They're kind of like putting down a line in the sand in designating what is yours versus what is not yours. I like to use the analogy. It's like maybe the fence that's in between you and your neighbor's yard. It helps you to know whose lawn you're mowing. At the end of the day, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be mowing somebody else's lawn and making more work for myself when it's not necessary. So I like to use the analogy that boundaries are just those invisible fences or guidelines that helps us to stay in between what is ours and helps to keep things that are not ours out. It's meant to protect us and also to safeguard us from other things outside of our yard. There's different types of boundaries. There's 3 types. There's rigid, porous, and healthy boundaries. Depending on how we were raised, we saw these boundaries modeled for us. So we may or may not be aware of what type of boundaries we have, because maybe there's some that have just been naturally passed down that we were not aware of. So a lot of what I see often is there's very porous boundaries, which means that they're almost invisible. There's lots of holes in the boundaries, and sometimes there's oversharing or difficulty saying no, or being over involved in other people's stuff or in their problems or their emotions. Maybe that could also be sharing in responsibility of someone else's stuff. And really what that stems from is just this fear of being rejected and fear of not being liked and not complying. So porous boundaries really comes from this place of maybe this being modeled for us, and maybe even struggling with loving ourselves well. And therefore we say maybe yes too often and we say no too little. So that's an example of porous boundaries. And then rigid boundaries is kind of on the other side of the spectrum. That's when we're too firm. This is kind of a self-preservation, a form of isolation to protect us. Maybe difficulty asking for help. Maybe someone has rigid boundaries, is very protective of their information. They have few friendships and seem very detached or disconnected. And keeping people at a distance actually feels safe. I think, again, rigid boundaries may have been something that was learned or taught, or maybe as a defense mechanism to maybe past trauma or hurt. But really what happens is that it prevents people from being a support to you and helping you through maybe challenges like coronavirus. So the goal of all of this is identifying those 2 extremes and making the conscious effort of, working towards some sort of a middle ground of healthy boundaries. I think it's important while we're talking about this, if you're listening to this in the audience, is taking kind of an inventory of your boundaries and being aware of where you're operating from. And then also identifying that we want to move toward that middle ground. And that middle ground would be valuing your own opinions, sharing your own opinions, not compromising your values or opinions for other people. There's a time and a place for that. But if you are compromising too often, then that may mean that you are violating self. You're not valuing yourself and your values and your beliefs. And then there's also a give and a take when you're in this place of this middle ground with healthy boundaries of giving and taking information. So it means that you're able to give information to others about your personal life and vice versa. So it's not oversharing or undersharing, but there's a give and a take of inviting someone into this intimate relationship with you. And then it's also communicating your needs and wants in a healthy way and accepting when others say no to you, or maybe even being able to say no to others. So these are some examples of those boundaries. So it goes back to rigid, porous, and healthy. And a great resource on boundary setting is Dr. Henry Cloud. He has tons of books and podcasts and send out emails, I think, daily on how to set healthy boundaries. And there's actually been a recent podcast, I believe, on boundaries during the pandemic. So that may be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes so people can find it, because that does sound very valuable. Because a lot of times we don't even understand what boundaries are. So thank you so much for addressing that.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to be very important going back to families and being in a relationship is identifying your boundaries and identifying your partner's boundaries, and there being a respect for where one another is at and what feels honoring to them. Because oftentimes there may be a difference in how you navigate your boundaries surrounded around the pandemic. An example could be maybe a partner feels a little bit more comfortable with going out to the store and venturing out and getting groceries, whereas the other partner does not and doesn't feel safe or comfortable. Instead of, trying to make them more comfortable, respecting where they're at. And if one partner feels a little bit more safe and grounded in going out, then maybe that partner takes on that responsibility and equally respecting their partner's wishes and boundaries about feeling safe. So we're going to be navigating this a lot in a season where maybe your partner's boundaries are different, and how can you respect them and accept them and not push them into maybe seeing things from your lens and from your boundary set.
Yes, that's important. And as you're talking, the thoughts that have been going through my mind are giving ourselves grace and our children grace during this time. I'm seeing posts and hearing things of people not understanding that their children are stressed as well. And it manifests differently in children than it may for us. And to give our children some grace too, that they're stressed. Often we expect our children to behave like little adults, and they're not, they're children.
Absolutely. I think that you named that really well, Michelle, is that I think we need to give grace in the season for self, for our partner, and for our children, and expect for there to be regressions, to expect for there to be maybe more behavioral challenges, expect for there to be some bumps in the road, that we're all trying to navigate this as best we can. And remembering that nobody's walked through the season before. This is new for all of us, and we're all just trying to do the best that we can with what we have. And I think that extending that grace to self and to others in a loving and compassionate way helps us to navigate the season a little bit better.
Yes. So would you have any coping skills for little ones that you could share?
I often work with kids, especially kids with anxiety. So I would say that in this situation, whether your kid has anxiety or not, this is different. And different for a little kid's brain could be perceived as a threat. So that could be the reason why maybe they're waking up more often during the night, or maybe they're having more accidents than usual, or maybe they're more irritable because they're not seeing their friends. So I think understanding that this different normal that we're in, it affects kids in a very different way. And to understand that and to name that will be helpful for us as parents. But to help kids to get through the season, I think more than anything is, I think trying to keep a sense of routines and consistency is vital right now. With school changing and maybe now doing homeschool at home, or not seeing friends or not going to soccer. It's challenging for our kids. So we want to, as best we can, still incorporate those things and give them a sense of normalcy within this pandemic. So what that may mean is school now looks different. Maybe you're still seeing your teacher, but you're seeing them over Zoom. You're maybe not connecting with your friends as much. Maybe, you're setting aside time with your kids to maybe do Facebook Kids Messenger or something so that they can still connect with their friends or play games, but respecting maybe some of the boundaries of social distancing. So I think it's vital right now to still integrate those things into their life in this season, and then also keep maybe a new routine going. I've talked with some of my clients about helping them to create a new routine and maybe inviting their kids in, age appropriate, of course, and inviting them into what they want their day to look like so they have a sense of control. So maybe what you do is on slips of paper, you write down the different responsibilities or tasks for the day, and you guys navigate what will our days look like. There's a lot of chaos, but there's also a lot of empowerment. We can make our schedule to be what we want it to be and what we need it to be in this season, and including them in that process. Now, of course, I would say this is probably for older, maybe elementary school kids, maybe 4th, 5th grade and up, giving them a little bit more autonomy and a voice. But of course, for those younger kids, mom and dad should be making those choices with a little bit more authority, just because our kids don't know what they need. And our job is to help navigate that with them in mind. So that may be a way to help keep a sense of consistency and routine in the season. And then also, I think letting kids know that things are changing daily and giving them the updates as needed, because they may get used to this new system and then tomorrow something may change. So something that we talk about in my counseling practice is flexibility is our best ability. So we're going to practice being flexible in this season, that things may change and it may be different than yesterday. But how can we practice being flexible today? Because I think in the season, we're getting new information at different times and in different manners. And our job as parents is to help take this information and now integrate that into our lives at home and help our kids to adapt as well, which is very challenging in this pandemic. It's constantly changing, but I think in the midst of that, routines and consistency is where we can help our kids to have a sense of normalcy and safety.
Yes, thank you. That's so helpful. It really is. So you've shared so many wonderful things, and I think I could talk to you for hours, but I know our time is winding up. So do you have one thought, one pearl of wisdom that you really want to leave families with?
There's so many different things that I would love to say and share if we have more time. But I think more than anything is, I think that parents, we are setting the emotional thermostat of our home.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I think that we need to be very mindful about what we're setting the thermostat to. And it's very difficult. There's so much compassion and empathy that I have for you, and also for myself being a parent of young ones, that we have more roles and responsibilities than ever in navigating new responsibilities, new ways of connecting, by trying to do the best that we can with what we have. And it's stressful. And with that, also being mindful that the emotional thermometer of our home, or thermostat of our home, we get to set the emotional thermostat. We don't want to be thermometers that change up and down. We want to set the thermostat where it's consistent and stable, and our kids need that. So let's just be mindful and show compassion toward ourselves for what we're going through, and also be mindful that we are empowered, that we can set the thermostat within our home to a certain pace, to a certain place of balance and calm and peace. And that we don't have to be a thermometer that goes up and down based upon the information that is coming and going. So I want to empower the audience that wherever you're at, as chaotic as this feels, and wherever you're at in your journey, that we're all in this together. There's coping skills and tools and self-care to help you to find a sense of balance and groundedness, and that you are empowered to set the thermostat of your home with your kids and with your spouse or significant other. That it's really vital that we remember that is one thing we can control, and to do it well, or as well as we can. in this season.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again. So beautifully stated.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're so welcome. And I appreciate this time with you so much. And if you're willing, I think we should do a part 2 of this.
Yeah, I would love to. I was just about to say, I'm like, it's hard to pick one thing. I would love to share more information and more tips and give more resources to the audience that has helped my clients and also helped me personally and professionally to get through this pandemic. So I'm looking forward to a part 2 where we can navigate maybe a little bit more of the logistics and time management skills and resources to help us to set us up for success and being proactive as best we can with what we have in this season so that people can not just survive, but thrive.
Yes, that we can create some resiliency through this because that is a possibility of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do believe that, Michelle. I'm looking forward to seeing us become stronger and more united and more patient and more loving and compassionate people. I do think that those are fruit that can be grown and sown in the season of hardship. So Thank you for reminding us that resiliency is something that can manifest from things that are devastating and hard.
Yeah, it can. So if someone wanted to reach out to you, how could they do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. People can reach out to me through email. My email is Tanya, Tanya.Alvarado, M as in Mike, A as in Apple, @gmail.com. I know it's long-winded, but email's probably the best way to reach me. And then also, if you prefer, you can pop over to my website at anewpathcounsel.com. Best way to reach me right now is through email with everything that's going on, and I respond quicker and more efficiently in that manner. But I'm so honored to be here with you and share this space with you today and hopefully give some tools and tips that will help the audience navigate the season with more hope and more encouragement and more practicality moving forward.
Yes, thank you again so much. And thank you all for listening. And please know that there are resources out there for you and so much information that can help you to navigate this season with more grace and more compassion and kindness to self and those we love. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And if you're enjoying the show, please share it with a friend. And you can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Because when you do, that helps get the show and the information out to more people.
For more great conversations like these, or to find out more information and access Michelle's library of amazing guests, go to birtheaseservices.com/podcast. For more information on the Birth Ease method, Michelle's classes, meditations, and other services, go to birtheaseservices.com.